Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we are going through CYBERSTORM Access as an entire set. If you guys have been following along, I've been bringing you news pretty much every time a card is dropped from this new core set. It's pretty exciting. I love going over core sets because they usually end up bringing the most to Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially if you are a competitive adjacent player. These sets tend to have the most relevant stuff that you would be looking at all. So today we're going to be looking through everything that really matters for the set. I usually break it into three main categories. If you watched the channel before, you know how I like to do this. We start with brand new archetypes out of nowhere. You know, talk about how relevant they are and how nice they are. Secondly, we're going to talk about support. This is the main cluster of the set, is mostly just a ton of support for archetypes that already exist. Konami does a good job with that. And then finally, we'll talk about generic cards that probably have the overall most impact on a core set, aside from stuff like Pote, where like we got Sprite and Tearlament side by side in the same deck. Obviously that was an outlier, whereas as far as individual cards go, usually the most impactful ones of the set are the more generic splashable cards that almost any deck can play, or at least a large cluster there. So let's get into it. We got a lot to get through. Let's start off with the brand new archetypes here. Starting off first. Oh, also, my internet is crapping its pants right now, so apologies if some of the artworks won't load. I'll do my best to make sure you guys know what we're talking about here. First and foremost, the Monodome archetype. Really cool archetype, is the next in line of the Visas Starfrost lore. Looks really cool. Has some really cool aspects to it. It looks like a synchro-based deck that pluses in cool ways. Has some solid spells, traps, monsters. They're open-ended, though. There's no restrictions built in there, so I feel like we just kind of haven't seen anybody figure out the best way to build them, maybe in the OCG or whoever's theory crafting in the TCG early. Maybe there's another way to like help make it work, but we'll definitely be looking at this one for more support, but there's definitely really good potential there. But it's no more than Rogue out the gate. Next up, we move to the Nemorelia archetype. This is a really, really interesting one. It only has like 5 cards, I think, to the archetype so far. It locks you out of your extra deck, and you summon out their 2 little boss monster guys. They just don't do anything. You know what I mean? They're just kind of beaters on the field. Still an interesting archetype. I'm very curious to see where they go. Hopefully they get follow-up in the next core set, but right now I don't think they're really doing anything competitively relevant that is worth mentioning. That's it for the new archetypes. We should also get Gold Pride as a, I guess, follow-up to whatever the first wave happens in Photon Hypernova as far as the TCG exclusive, but yeah, that's just worth noting. Now I move into all the legacy support. I'm kind of going to zoom through a lot of this just because there's a ton of them. First and foremost, the cover cards. Firewall support, Cybers support. It's interesting. I don't know. Cybers has this interesting thing where there's just so many just like generically good Cybers cards. They really have to power creep some of the old ones out to actually like make those decks better, but they're interesting. There's definitely some interesting Cybers cards here to make note of. Next up, we move to Super Heavy Samurai. This is one of the big ones. I think this really could have an impact on the competitive scene. This engine appears that it can be splashed into straight up pendulum decks as a really crazy advantage engine. It gets you like a ton of advantage. It gets you like a low scale and a rank 4 without your normal summon if you just see one of the starters. Really, really insane value there. I'm curious to see if either this deck as a pure deck can make it happen, or if, certain pendulum decks actually see an uptick because of this engine. Moving on, we have actually a lot of branded support in here. We'll see a handful of other things, but there's like a really good new fusion that like reborns any 2 monsters from graves. This card seems to be the most relevant one overall. It's like a Dogmatic and a Despier card. It foolishes Albaz cards, and then also helps you reborn Albaz cards as well. So it's a really, really good card. The branded deck is like crazy. They're just going wild with that. So definitely read more into those. There's a couple of different ones. This one and the Fusion are the most relevant though. Next up here, Tellarknights. This is going to be one of the bigger sellers of the set as far as legacy support goes. This is a deck that is definitely a fan favorite. A lot of people definitely been waiting a long time for this archetype to get support. It finally does here, so I'm betting a lot of people will be excited for this one. I think they're a pretty respectable rogue deck post this support for sure. Vicious a Shroud. This is just like straight up Visas Starfrost support. You can kind of just contact fuse this by banishing Starfrost plus one of the monsters in those archetypes that are in that lore that have exactly 1500 attack, 2100 defense. Monodome has one of those. You can banish them from your graveyard, so you can just cheat this card out by just getting those engraved, which is kind of insane. And you can target a monster on the field and destroy it when he's summoned. It's pretty good. Moving on, we have a Bestial Luber. This is just worth mentioning. There's actually like 2 Bestial cards in here, technically. Oh, 3 actually. My bad. 3, I think. The Synchro's generic. This card's fine. And there's like a new trap, but I don't know if you would play it over the current trap. But it's searchable. It's worth noting. If you're interested in that, look into it. Pirelli, this is really good. Pirelli out the gate from Amazing Defenders that we're going to get here in a couple weeks, 2 weeks in the TCG. They look really mediocre. This next wave of support really, really helps. Specifically this new monster. They also get another quick play spell, which helps. I'm really excited to see what we get in the next set, because I think the next set could really, really solidify them as like a really respectable rogue deck. I think this might already be enough to just make them a playable rogue deck. But the next set, if they get like one more extra deck monster that's really good, maybe one of the level 2s that's easier to make, easier to get to, we could be cooking with gas for sure. So, very cool. Mikanko also gets 2 more cards here, namely the new monster that is an emergency teleport target, so gotta love it. And when it's equipped, it searches a trap, so good for the deck for sure. 2 new spirit cards. These don't have any competitive relevance at all, but, you know, they're here. It's spirits. If you like them, it's like the same thing as Gemini, essentially. They're on like the same level, I feel like. Next up, we have Dual Avatar, a new fusion for them. Actually pretty good. It just like banishes a card on the field on the opponent's turn. So it does give them like finally a like legit boss monster worth summoning that's interruptive. Pretty respectively, so it's cool. Not entirely sure if it's enough, because you do have to make it with like very specific materials, which doesn't make it as generically awesome for them as it could have been, but still a good card nonetheless. Still helps them. We'll see. Next up, Sulfur Core. They actually get a new Link 3 and I believe a spell. The Link 3 is, by the way, like completely generic for pendulums. Any 2 or more monsters, including a pendulum, so super generic for those decks. You would have to play like an actual Sulfur Core engine, because she can like negate a card by like special summoning a Sulfur Core with a specific scale from your scale. So it could be cool, but it just kind of depends. Moving on, B Trooper, new fusion. Not necessarily the direction I was hoping for, but this is a nice card at the very worst. It makes instant fusion like an insane one of in the deck. Essentially like makes it as strong as like Kit Kalos, or very similar. This card like searches a B Trooper card on summon, and it has an extension effect later on to get a banished B Trooper back. Like, it's pretty good. I don't know if the deck has the tools to be like a legit fusion deck, but like if they want to steer in that direction, this is a really strong piece, so we'll take it. A Kashtira card. This card's pretty cheeks. I don't think they'll end up playing it, but it's worth mentioning, I guess, because it's going to be one of the tier 1 decks probably pretty soon here. Worth mentioning. And these are all the one-offs, I think. Dynamorphia Intact, really nice card for them. One of their biggest weaknesses is Ash Blossom on their traps to keep them just straight up off their engine. This card is just a monster negate as long as you have any face-up Dynamorphia card, not monster. So if you even activate one of the traps, boom, this is live to just be Solemn Strike. Very good. Libromancer Origin, cool card for their engine. They kind of just get to do the same plays they did before, except this card, you just get this card for free throughout the process. Pretty cool. Gives you a little bit extra value. A new Amazement Monster, unfortunately, it missed the mark. I think it's pretty bad, but if you like that deck on a casual level, that's cool for them. S-Force Night Chaser, a pretty interesting Link 1. I've seen this be pretty divisive on the video I made about it. A lot of people were kind of poo-pooing it, but I actually thought, no, it doesn't fix S-Force, and I know we see Link 1s and you're like, wow, a Link 1 can be as crazy as, you know, Musketeer Max or something crazy like that, Sarah, that just straight up like become the centerpiece of an archetype. I do still think it's a good card for them. Doesn't fix them, but if we ever get support down the line, this could be an immensely important piece for the deck. So I think it's a move in the right direction. Sword Soul spell. It's a decent removal spell, but it's like maybe a one of you tech in, but it's probably not good enough to actually play. Kind of bricky. A new Gunkin card. Technically, it's a searcher, but it's like a really interesting thematic card. But it's not that great, I think, for them. But if you like Gunkin, it's more of a meme deck anyway, so cool. Reinforce. This is a new Rescue Ace card. Unfortunately, like the Mikanko and Pirelli stuff was actually like decent. This card is not that good. It kind of just makes your guy like kind of a pseudo towers until the end of the turn. Whereas like they actually got like engine pieces, or this guy missed the mark. They got like legit good cards. This guy just missed the mark. Sorry, blanking here. Yeah, I'm really hoping in the next set they come through with some Rescue Ace support. I really hope they don't just kind of give it the cold shoulder, give it the Ogdoadic treatment, you know what I'm saying? Infinitrack Road Roller. It's a pretty cool Earth Machine card. Could be part of certain combos. I haven't 3D crafted it with it yet. You guys know I like Earth Machine. But it is a pretty cool card, so we'll take it. It's a cool extender for them. And then Harvest Angel of Doom. Actually like a counter fairy card. It searches both Black Horn of Heaven and regular Horn of Heaven if you want. Not the worst. I don't know, but yeah, it's counter fairies. They suck going second, so they'll probably never be actually good. But there you go. That's it for all the actual support stuff. There's actually technically some other support cards, but they actually ended up being generic enough where I just put them in the generic category here, which is what we move to here to finish up our third and final section. The first card, Ringo Worm, the 100 Apple Dragon. Pretty cool card. He's actually Konami's been doing this a little more often. They've actually been delving into actually making tuners good cards. In the past, they just like seemed to not want to make a ton of really good tuners. I mean, end up getting like Glow Up Bulb Band and stuff like that. This card's just a decent extender, especially in something like Tenyi. Tenyi, which is really cool. And he also gives you a tuner like token from Grave later on too. It's pretty cool. This card's pretty strong. I think it could come up. Next up we have Wannabe. This card kind of lets you excavate the top of your deck and look for a trap card. So it's a cool consistency card for like very heavy trap decks, but there's obviously not a ton of trap decks that are like quite heavy enough to make this card good enough, but like Eldritch is definitely there, so it's a cool card for them. Good consistency piece. We'll take it. Bunny Instruct Ear. This one's a weird one. I think it's mainly interesting because it could have some application to something like a Tri-Brigade mishmash deck. But it's technically just kind of like an interruption. It's just an interruption. I don't know. It's a Beast Warrior. It's searchable off Tenyi. It's not amazing, but it's a card that could maybe come up as like a really interesting one-of tech in a deck. But we'll see. Ice Jade, Adrian Ron. This card is crazy. It discards one other Ice Jade or Water Monster to summon itself and a token. And this card's a level 7 Aqua Tuner. So the token's level 3. So this card is just like with any other Water Monster in hand, just like a 1-card Synchro 10. It does lock into waters, but luckily, I think in the set prior is when we get the Ice Jade Synchro that's like actually a really powerful boss monster. So just being a 1.5 card, that, especially if you're splashing it in with something like a Mermail Atlantean deck, they have a ton of effects that trigger when they're pitched anyway. So you get really good value in like a free boss monster super easily, and an awesome extender. So really cool. Next up is Timerending Morganite. This card's really interesting. It says for like the rest of the duel, you get 2 normal summons per turn, and you draw 2 cards instead of just 1 for your draw phase. It does keep you from being able to activate monster effects in the hand, so no hand traps that are monsters. Still play Imperm or Board Breakers, but very interesting card. I could see this coming up specifically in like a certain type of stun deck is kind of what stands out to me, but there could also be some random other archetypes too where this could come up. Even Flunder. They don't activate effects in hand. They wouldn't be able to shifter though, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely some decks that definitely will want to mess around with this, see how it goes. Tri-Brigade Roar, I know this is a Tri-Brigade card and obviously has the most utility in a Tri-Brigade deck, but I also wanted to bring this up because It's a pretty good generic card. I made a video about this a couple days ago, how it could just be straight up Upstart Goblin for certain decks, but even worst case scenario, it's just Forbidden Chalice. Target a monster on the field, negate it. It's a really good quick play spell. I think it could have some really good applications in a couple different decks. Definitely something worth looking into. For traps, we have a new Trap Trick kind of esque card. Sets a normal trap straight from the deck, but you don't even have to play multiple copies of it like you do with Trap Trick. So very interesting there. You just have to destroy a monster when you activate it. So, you know, there's your cost, but still a pretty cool card. We also get Fusion Reproduction, a new fusion card, trap card that targets any poly or fusion spell, I believe, in grave, banishes it, and if you do, you apply that card's effects as if it was this card's effect. So pretty cool, giving you the ability to fuse on the opponent's turn. You do have to set up some kind of fusion card in grave, but assuming you can, this is a pretty cool normal trap card. I also love the artwork with Scientist in there. It's cool. Rank 9. We get a new virtual world that's technically a generic rank 9. I'm not going to lie to you. It's probably not good enough. It is generic, so I threw it in here anyway. But, like, I don't even think you make this. You probably just make the generator boss monster instead of this. Way more powerful. Or even, like, Hyperiton's probably better than this as a generic rank 9. So, unfortunately, kind of missed the mark there, in my opinion. And then we get to the cream of the crop as far as the generic cards go for the set. 3 synchro monsters that are, like, actually all, like, pretty insane. The first one is Bestial Despier. This card's crazy. The only specific thing it needs for its materials is a non-tuner dragon. Other than that, this card's crazy. It lets you just summon back banished light or dark monsters. And when your opponent activates a monster effect, you can target a banished card, shuffle in the deck. Then if you were that card's owner, you destroy the monster that activated its effect. And if your opponent was the owner, you negate the effect. So depending on what you shuffle, whether it's your card or your opponent's card, you're either negating or destroying the monster or like ogreing it. And then from there, he's also 35/35 and a pretty easy 10 to make. So very, very powerful card for sure. From there, we move to the new Despier monster. This one has really interesting applications to me. It is a 12, and it requires a level 4 tuner. But there's still some really cool applications here. If any card leaves either extra deck, so pretty much just means like if an extra deck monster is summoned, you can make all face-up monsters you currently control gain 500, then negate the effects of any face-up card on the field until the end of this turn. That could just easily be the monster summoned from the extra deck, so just negate it. And during the end phase of this card was sent to the grave that turn, you can special summon a light spellcaster whose attack equals its defense straight from the deck. That's actually a really powerful float. There's stuff like Cartesia, Ecclesia, pretty much any of the Ecclesias are all like 15/15 light spellcasters. So this card, really, really cool. Also, don't forget about the new fusion in Photon Hypernova that if your opponent summons a monster by an activated monster effect, that card in grave can just summon any Despier monster straight from the extra. So you just get to like cheat this out. Off of that, then he's an interruption. You're in a really good spot. So just keep that in mind. Really cool application there as well. And then finishing up here, probably the chase card of the set, if you were to ask me at this point in time, it's Chaos Angel. This card is crazy. He needs a light or a dark for the non-tuner monsters to make him. And funny enough, he actually doesn't need tuners. He says that you can make him with any light or dark and treat it as a tuner if you don't have a tuner. So any 2 monsters, as long as they're lights and darks that add up to 10, boom. So this guy is kind of just like one of the craziest, kind of functioning like a Link 2 because of how easy he is to summon, not needing tuners. Really insane. On summon, he banishes a card, and just like Despier, 3,500 attack. And he also gains protection effects based on what lights or darks you make him with. Absolutely insane card. I think this card's going to be seeing a ton of play. A ton. Just because lights and darks are already the best attributes in the game. We already play decks that make 10s. This is just an insane card to be able to also play in those decks. So I expect him to be the biggest chase card of the set. Probably a secret rare, probably pretty expensive, but at least you probably only need 1. So if you can just get the 1, you should be good. That is everything that matters for the set. Overall, I would say while I think Chaos Angel is really powerful, I would say there still doesn't feel like anything fully universal as far as like a generic card in the set. I kind of like to see that. You know, I talk about the Forbidden Droplets, the Triple Tactics Talents, right? those kind of cards where you're like, wow, that's a card that it doesn't even matter what deck you're currently playing. You look at it and you're like, I'm going to have to play that at some point. There's going to be a format where I'm going to be like, I have to play this. I wouldn't say there's anything like that in this set, but I still do think there's a handful of really good generic cards. As far as the support goes, kind of like usual. There's a handful of decks that like become rogue or even better rogue that weren't before, so that's good, as well as stuff like branded support that makes that deck even better. Gives other variants of like those decks that you can play. So there's some cool stuff there. As far as the new archetypes go, kind of like okay starts, but of course we need to see like the follow-up on it. So as far as this set's concerned, they're just okay. They're not doing anything too crazy, so we'll have to see on those. All in all, I give this set like a solid like 6.5, 7 out of 10. I feel like I'm just kind of in the middle here. Not great, not terrible. I'm not mad about it. You know, but obviously, you know, reveals down the line will make some of these, especially newer stuff, seem more or less relevant, depending on where Konami goes with that. But still a really cool set nonetheless. I'm very excited for it. I always get excited for core sets, even if they're not the best core set in the world, just because there's going to be so much to go through and mess with, and all that is so exciting for me. But yeah, there's your in-depth review of CYBERSTORM Access. Pretty good set. Where do you guys rank it? I gave it a 6.5 out of 10 is where I think I'm going to land. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you go higher? Do you go lower on this set as far as its early reveals? Obviously, we're going to get TCG exclusives and imports as well for the final 20 slots. But as far as the core stuff, let me know your thoughts on that down below. I'm tired of rambling, though. Thank you so much for watching, as always, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.